this is Fad Sagri representing group number 6. Our study focus is water flooding being the most common technique of the secondary recovery approaches. Water flooding is a method where you inject water into a hydrocarbon reservoir to recover up to 75% of the original oil in place after the reservoir loses its own potential. This presentation is about exploring water flooding as a general topic, the significance of applying it to the petroleum industry, and some of the challenges it's facing.
Louisiana's subsurface structures can be quite complicated, especially in the nearshore environment. Salt domes, faults, and deltaic-type deposits can be subjected to several different variables and parameters that make it difficult for us to interpret the structures of the reservoir, and consequently, the water flooding mechanism that should be applied. Here in South Louisiana, water flooding is not especially favorable as other areas due to the difficult sand member discontinuities, difficult to interpret fault patterns, and uncertainty in uneven well-producing well arrangements. Different type of reservoirs can lead to difference in water flooding performance, some of which are unexpected and yield a very effective process while others are not. Since most of the field's subsurface structure is quite similar to each other, the results after applying water flooding to 4 Miocene reservoirs in South Louisiana concludes the following 2 observations. In partial water drive reservoirs, significant water production does not prevent the installation and usage of water flooding, and that the only deciding factor for the use of water injection is the potential of significant remaining reserves.
Deep water environment water flooding can be effective, but has a considerable amount of issues that need to be addressed to be profitable. One issue is lack of tension-leg platform wells, high cost of subsea wells, and limitation of subsea systems to handle larger water cuts. The main fix for this is to use a smaller number of injectors with a higher injection rate. Another issue is that seawater needs to be treated before injection. Lack of treatment can cause issues such as oxygen corrosion, biofouling, microbial-induced corrosion, injectivity problems, reservoir souring, and barite scaling. One fix for the particulate and oxygen levels is putting the water intake at an optimum depth as to limit those factors. Another issue is organisms that cause biofouling, which creates a biofilm that is corrosive. The fix is to have a filter at the intake and also to treat the system with biocide once a week for 2 to 4 hours. The biggest challenge is the concentration of sulfate in the seawater due to hydrogen sulfide, which is corrosive and also toxic if it reaches topside. The fix for this is to use SRUs and SRBs, which are sulfate removal units and sulfate removal bacteria, respectively, which should limit the formation of H2S. The tricky thing with souring is actually determining the likelihood of souring. This can be predicted through reservoir modeling, although there is an uncertainty with this. All in all, deep water environment water flooding can be profitable, but there are some issues to overcome first.
Low salinity water flooding is an approach to contemporary water flooding, where instead of conveniently using a nearby high salinity sea for injecting fluid, the producing company will use a source of water with lower salinity. The effects of low salinity water injection were first published in the 1990s by a group from the University of Wyoming. This group found that when injecting water with a total dissolved solids content of less than 5,000 parts per million, they resulted with higher oil recovery rates than when injecting with high salinity water, such as seawater. A few other benefits of this technique of water flooding is its cost efficiency and its flexible operations. For example, you can begin the process with a low salinity fluid, or you can implement it after noticing that high salinity may not be quite as effective as you'd like it to be. This technique even works both offshore and onshore. Unfortunately, most companies have been hesitant to adopting this form of water flooding because of the lack of data that people have been able to achieve. Although people have been able to show that it does produce higher oil recovery rates, they have not necessarily been able to specify as to why those rates occur. If we expect to see a future in low salinity water flooding, we need to try and narrow down the reasons that it improves recovery and prove that to companies so that way they may implement the technique for themselves.
After investigating water flooding in low salinity technique, deep water, heavy oils, and reservoirs in South Louisiana, it can be seen that water flooding is indeed a very important technique in oil recovery operations. Up to this point, our plan is investigating the topics that falls under water flooding recovery and pick an appropriate field with the help of our advisor to apply our studies and knowledge on it.